explain all the handouts here in a moment.
Okay, let's call this meeting in order. Notice an open work session to the City Council of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, February 4, 2020. Mr. Eric.
Thanks, sir. So in this year's fiscal year budget, the council approved doing an updated community survey. Did the last one 3 years ago, and a new survey of the business community to determine its satisfaction with city services. So now, before the council for review and we hope approval, our goal would be to have approval of each draft by the end of the work session tonight, are those two draft survey instruments. And to present some more information, I'll turn it over to the Assistant City Administrator, Kim Nakahoto.
How much did we budget? Can you just tell that right off the bat for the survey?
I believe $40,000, and they're coming in at less than the budget number, but that's for two.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Eric said, we'll be covering both surveys this evening. In front of you, you found a bunch of papers. You found one that just has a staple on it, and then you found another stack that has two surveys paper clipped together. The one that is paper clipped together is just so you can see what those survey items will look like when they're mailed out to the respondents. The one that we will be using tonight is the one that's just stapled. That's more of an annotated one. That way you can see what changes have been made year after year. And then for this evening, if you're amenable, what I thought that I would do is I would call on Robert Heacock from ETC Institute, and he'll kind of go over the survey itself, how it's administered, the philosophies behind surveying, the methodology, the benchmarking, that particular process, and he's happy to answer any of those questions. Then we'll go through the community survey. I'll go through just what the changes are. We did make some updates and changes from the previous. This survey was completed in 2017, so a couple of things have changed, as well as a couple of department directors had requested some more information about their department or division. And then we'll go over into the business survey, which is new to our community, but it is not new to the region, and that's one of the things that Robert can kind of touch on. This is something that more and more communities are doing to learn about their business community, their satisfaction with city services, and what their future plans are within our community. And then I thought we would end with the Armor Road questions, which is the last page in the handout that's at your desk. We'll review the questions that's in the resident survey as well as what's in the business survey, because they're a little bit different since the audiences are a little bit different as well. So if that will work with you, if we kind of use that format, yeah, I'm happy to introduce Robert Heacock with ETC Institute.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here and to represent ETC Institute. We're based in Olathe, Kansas. ETC Institute was formed and started as a company around 1982. Really got into the community survey field and is now a leader in that, but started really doing that in the late 1990s. And at that time, I was in another community in the area, one of the founders of that. We worked together off of the premise that we thought it would be important to engage citizens, to help guide cities, to help give more feedback on what they think about city services and how to plan for the future. So many times, those of us in government only seem to hear from the squeaky wheels, and those people do have valid opinions, but sometimes they represent an opinion that is not true for the entire community. So the philosophy behind these surveys, with both the citizen survey and the business survey, is to give you more of an objective, overall, scientifically based feedback mechanism to help give you feedback on how you're doing and also give you future information to help guide your future plans and decision-making processes. As I mentioned, the community survey work that ETC does started in about 1998 or so. It's called the Direction Finder Survey. That's something that the name really says it all in terms of what we try to do. We try to help communities find their direction and by engaging with the community. that area has really grown in the time period. We've now, in the last 10 years, have surveyed over 2 million people in over 900 jurisdictions in 49 states. I keep offering to go to Hawaii to drum up business, but so far they haven't taken me up on that offer. Days like today, it wouldn't be bad to be there. But anyway, we do go through scientifically based processes to generate. I get a lot of questions. How do you send out a limited survey to a limited number of the population in some cases and extrapolate that to the whole? I'd be glad to get into that a little bit. I'm not a mathematician, but suffice it to say it is a mathematical formula. And what we do is we try to get you to a margin of error so that 95, 96% of the time you're going to be plus or minus a certain number, that number of times, 95% of the time. That's what we try to drive. And it's all mathematically driven. It's been shown to be accurate and trusted and relied upon by communities, cities, and counties across the country. We do, I should say also, we do employee surveys. We do park surveys. We conduct transportation surveys. In fact, we're one of the largest transportation survey companies in the country. Now we're really getting into the field of the business surveys, and that's why I came on board with ETC primarily to help shepherd their business survey development. The idea being that we've done a good job of engaging residents, but so much of what we do as communities is trying to build economic development, trying to grow as a community in a positive, quality way, and to balance all those factors together. And in order to do that, we really need to know what the businesses think. Not only what they think about our services, are we doing a good job, but what do they think in terms of their plans for the future? Are they going to add staff? Are they going to invest in your community? Or are they looking at downsizing? One community I recently did a business survey for, or we did a business survey for, revealed that 11% of their businesses indicated that they planned on leaving that community in the next 12 months. That was a big surprise and a big wake-up call to them. They didn't really have an idea that that was coming. I'd rather not say what community that is for obvious reasons, but it really gave them some great information to engage the community and the businesses in a different way to find out what's going on and why are they thinking that way. So we hope there's value to that. We're excited that you're on board with doing it. We are eventually going to be able to have enough communities in the area to do benchmarking on the business survey. Won't be able to have that, obviously, this year one right now, but hopefully in a couple of years or a year or so we will have enough that we can start showing that to you and benchmark that data for the region. I know we have 4 or 5 other cities lined up already. So we're glad you're helping out and helping us develop that product. We think it'll be a successful one and of value to you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about our company and how we approach surveys.
I have a question about the survey. Is it a sampling of people that you're taking? How many residents, businesses are going to be sampled?
Yeah, in your case, on the resident survey, we're going to send it out to every household.
Every household and the
Yes.
residents. Okay, that's good.
And then in terms of the businesses, we don't necessarily say upfront how many we're going to send it to. We have a target number, and I believe the target number was 100 businesses. And so we'll do whatever it takes to get that number for you. That's what we're contracted to do. Now, I should say the survey instruments, the responses to these surveys are different. On the community survey, generally speaking, people will go online primarily. They don't. We'll get some people still. We'll mail that out to everybody.
Right.
So it'll be mailed out and they fill that out. Mm-hmm. Most people nowadays will go online to fill that out as a resident.
Right.
The businesses tend to rely more on phone calls for some reason. So it'll be a lot more phone call. We'll still send them out, but it'll be more phone call intensive.
Because I'm not sure how many businesses we have in North Kansas City total. I'm sure our business council could maybe tell us that. But, that's one thing I was concerned about is like the sampling and if we're getting enough people. I like that we're sending it to every resident. I'd like to explore maybe getting most of the businesses, at least if not all. I don't know, again, how many there are, but just speaking off the cuff, I think we need to try to get as many businesses as well as we can, because, we're a smaller city.
I think we have about 1,000 total businesses. Something.
I'm not sure how the other council people feel, but I am glad that we're doing every residence, and I think our business community, we need to make sure that they have the input they can, and maybe the business council can help us with that, so.
Robert, do you want to comment on the ability to, increase the sample size of businesses from 100 to something like tenfold that?
Well, I think the suggestion might be that we try to mail it out to every business if possible, and I don't know if that's possible, quite frankly. But in terms of increasing the response rate, I will say that we generally target 10% on the businesses, and that's a tall task sometimes. They haven't been engaged in this before. Business folks react differently to that. That's why we have to rely a lot on phone calls in order to get them to do that. That's more labor and time intensive on our part.
Is this just your presentation here, that it hasn't gone out to bid or anything like that yet as far as a contract? Is that correct, Eric?
You did award the contract.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Would it be more beneficial for the business contacts to be more local downtown type businesses than some manufacturing plant out in the Paseo area?
Well, I think they all give you different feedback based on their businesses, honestly, and it's up to you. But one of the things we try to do is make sure that we get a representative demographic in each of the surveys that we do, that it closely mirrors your actual demographics.
Now, what's your percentage of returns?
It varies. Each survey is different. In some communities, we will get way over that. The last time we did a community survey for you, we did receive a fair number over the amount that we were targeting. Some cities, just people respond really well, and in other cases, it might be time of year, it might be a particular community, people respond differently. But that's why some companies will come in and say, we're going to market, we're going to send all these out, we can't guarantee you how many we're going to get. Our guarantee is we will get at least those numbers that we had in the contract so that we can get you that statistically valid number.
You maybe just answered that, but you're talking about getting them out to different businesses. Will we be able to possibly get back a result of maybe by category? I know it's supposed to be anonymous, but could we maybe get a breakdown of the category you've sent them to?
Yeah, I think as you go through it, you'll see some of the questions give you that breakdown.
We'll give them back to that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just real quick, that information of how they will pick what business gets, they actually will receive that information partially from the city with our business license information and partially from the census. And the reason being is the city, we don't regulate every single business that is located here. We are prohibited from regulating a few of them. So if we really wanted to get a scope of what is here, we have to rely on several different sources of information.
Okay, so we'll be generating. Okay, thank you.
I was curious, just kind of as a general question. Well, one, I'd say I love the fact that you're local and that you guys have the experience that you do. So I think we're really lucky to have you, on this contract. But I kind of have sort of a general question, and maybe it applies to other communities as well. But we're sort of in a transitional phase in North Kansas City, I believe. So we've had people who have lived here for a long time, and then we also have a lot of people moving in. And some of the things we do in the city draw different sorts of people into the city, so we get a little bit more of the River Market crowd, or, a little bit, just kind of a diverse community. I'm curious about how this type of survey kind of gives you a point in time that at this point in time, this is the philosophy, or this is how people think, or here's the disconnects that we're having, or two sides of an issue. But how do you project that into the future to say, okay, here's what the community may look like in 5 years or in 10 years if it continues to move along the path? Do you have a way that you can do some of that?
Well, we can certainly show you where you've been and how that's changed, and how you compare to benchmark other cities in the metro area and other cities nationally that are in your size category of community. That's probably the best you can do. I don't know if you can necessarily, you can do a trend line. I think, Kim, this will be the third community survey I'm aware
You
of.
could do a trend line from the history to see kind of if
Yes.
we continue on the same path, here's where we're going to kind of end up as far as demographics or as philosophies or whatever the case.
We're fortunate in this point of time that we're going to be doing this community survey right now, and then in the next year we'll have some census information that will really give us some very good baseline information. It is a best practice for communities to do these style of direction finder community surveys every several years, just to make sure that we're constantly taking the pulse of where the priorities are and where our community wants us to be.
Okay.
And I should say, you will have the data to allow you to drill down into, okay, how did this demographic respond to these types of questions? So you can compare and contrast renters versus owners in terms of residential property, that sort of thing, and other demographics. And we do have a product that is just coming out this year that we haven't talked to your staff about. It's an online data management system that would allow us to upload all of your past surveys and future surveys, and you were able to cross-correlate certain questions and responses. So for example, if you wanted to know what women over the age of 40, how safe they feel in their neighborhood, we could do that and then correlate it with how adequate is that same demographic think street lighting is in their neighborhood. So you can see whether street lighting might be inferred to make a difference in that particular neighborhood. You can also map and see how changes have happened. Sometimes you'll see a change over time, but you won't know where that's occurring in your community. So you're left as a council not really knowing that, and the online version is something we can talk to you later. It's something we developed last year and we're now marketing this year.
Okay. Have we done business surveys before? Is this the first one?
No,
So we
this
don't
will be
really
our
have that
first.
3-year trend line, I guess, on the businesses. I think the same dynamic, in my opinion, exists in the business community as well, because we have businesses that have been here a long time. We have new businesses that are coming on board, so it'll be kind of curious to see.
And one of the
how that
questions
goes.
we have is, I believe we still have in the survey, Kim, is you know, how do you think things have changed? Are they kind of moving, that sort of, is the city moving in the right direction? You know, how has that changed over the last X many years? And you can ask those types of questions, at least from the people here, giving you their sense of you know, how they think things have changed in the right direction or not, you know, in the last however many years you want to ask. So.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I like the survey questions. I think we should move forward with it, but I think we need to see about, upping the business. I'm glad we're sending it to every residence and see about upping the business count. But as a general rule, I like the survey. It asks, how long you've lived here and got very specific questions.
I have to imagine that would increase the cost beyond what's.
What's the cost now? What did their contract come in at?
Each one was, I think, 17,225 or 17,250.
Okay.
I'll look at the number. I can provide your staff with the number of how many we would actually plan on sending it out to. It really depends on the available list information that we have, how good the business license list is, and then what we have to do to supplement that. I have the number of responses we're targeting, which is usually 10%, but I don't know if we're sending that out to 200, 300, how many businesses we're sending that out to.
If we send it out too, that doesn't mean that a business that didn't receive it can't go online and fill out the survey as well, correct? Or no?
They can, but we don't tabulate them necessarily with those because we try to make sure that they're sent out randomly. If we're not sending it to the entire population,
Sure.
we would try to make sure that we have a random selection. So typically what we'll do, if we get a substantive number, we will add it sort of as a footnote, or in the appendix, we'll provide the data that shows what the additional people had said. But otherwise, you risk, like, let's say, for example, Chamber of Commerce, if they wanted to encourage anybody who received a survey to go ahead and fill it out, that's one thing. But if they wanted to make sure everybody did fill one out from that particular subgroup, it might skew the results from those people who are not a member of that particular organization, just as an example. So we try to everything we can do to make sure that it's truly random and that not one group. Same thing with park surveys. Maybe it's easier to visualize if you have your softball league. And if they make sure they get on your park survey and everybody and every parent and every kid's family who's been in softball answers the question, that's going to give you
Skews the
maybe a skewed
results,
result.
Right. I'm just trying to make sure that our businesses, have a fair voice as well. And, I know we've awarded the contract, but we need to look at the costs and what companies can do for the costs that we're asking. So if you can look at the numbers and get back to us before we approve anything, that'd be great.
Do that.
So just to be clear about what we're asking for tonight, sir, it said the contract's been awarded. If you wanted to amend it in some way, you could tell us and we could bring it back to you. What we're asking you to do tonight, we hope you'll be able to do tonight before you're done, is approve the survey instruments, the actual verbiage in each one. Again, you've awarded the contract. I believe it was at your last meeting.
I'm okay with the material.
The only thing I have to say about the materials, I thought they looked great. There's some questions that the categories were very satisfied, satisfied, neutral, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied. And from when I read them, I would be more likely to answer them agree, disagree, somewhat agree, so there's a little tweaking there that I found. So for example, in general, my neighborhood needs to be improved. That's a question I would answer with agree, to strongly disagree, strongly agree to strongly disagree. I don't know how to answer that question in terms of very satisfied, very dissatisfied. Like, for me, it's a little bit of a disconnect. So that's the only thing I would say, and there's only a couple sections that were like that for me.
If there's any particular questions that you're thinking of that maybe we could tweak the phrasing, we can.
Okay.
Those categories, however, are kind of like how we
Yeah.
have them and compare them to everybody else.
Yeah, and I
the
noticed that
benchmark.
they stay very satisfied on most categories. Some categories go in terms of always, usually, sometime, so there were
Right.
just some that read differently to me, and like they were a little,
As Kim goes through it, we can take a look and note any of those that you particularly had a question about. I would say it's important from our standpoint to measure level of intensity of feelings.
Yeah.
And then some of those cases. So generally speaking, when we report them out to you, however, we sort of lump the reds, we put them in red as dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. We kind of put them in a group together, and the satisfied, we still stratify in terms of the very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. Just, that's been helpful for people to kind of
Yeah.
really understand.
Yeah, I generally like that scale. It's just, for me, there was a little bit of a disconnect with the question being asked and the answer.
Maybe the question could be answered in a different way,
There
and
were a
we're
couple
fine.
of sections like that, but otherwise, I was very impressed by the details and that you guys had really thought through what are the actual touch points in our community with our residents, and what are the touch points with businesses, and how are they being, so I feel like I hope there's no stone unturned, because it looked pretty comprehensive to me.
Well, thank you, and I should say credit goes to a lot of the cities in the area, and back in 1998, we used focus group of cities throughout the state to help us, mainly in Kansas City. We did focus groups on the business survey. Last year, we did focus groups in Kansas City. I don't know if your staff was able to make that, but I know we got feedback from your staff as part of that, and we also held focus groups on the business survey in St. Louis area as well. So I appreciate the feedback. We want to be as helpful as we can, and if there are other topics or things that you really feel passionate about, that's part of why Kim wants to walk through the questions, to make sure that you have an opportunity to give us that feedback.
I was going to ask a follow-up on question number 19 about the public
Oh.
meetings.
We were going to go through them page by
Oh.
page. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yep.
That's fine. Maybe you answer my question. Thank you.
If you guys, if
Ms.
you have
Mayor,
any
if
more
you're good,
questions
Now I'm
for
going to forget. No,
Robert,
no. Put it right down.
we thought we would go kind of, I hate to say page by page, but go page by page and start with the community survey first. As you kind of flip through the document that's at your desk, if it's in yellow, that means that there's been a change from what we have asked previous years. So page 1 doesn't have any changes on it. Page 2 has a new section that the chief had asked us to add on, it's question number 7. We asked a similar style question to this before. It's kind of, how do you rate the interactions with our employees? So that section is new. That is a new question 7, asking if you have interfaced with any of the employees within the police department, how was your experience? And then there's several questions there. If you haven't, then you kind of gloss onto the next. If you have, he's asked that you kind of go through and ask about the behavior and your interaction. Question number 8, Kelly had asked that we ask a question about the quality of special event programs. Over the last several years, new special event programs have been added onto her service list, and she would like to ask residents how they feel about those new programs.
Can you give an example of the service event programs?
A special event program, that would be
Special
like
event.
Arts in the Park.
Arts in the park, or
Yeah.
the concerts in the park, or whatever?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. The mistletoe market, those are some of the newer programs that she's asking, how are we doing in this category?
Would it be helpful to have parentheses and some examples of those
I think,
programs?
right, yeah, because people aren't going to know what that means.
On that same page, there has been an ask, Sarah has asked that we add question 10. So because in 2017, that department was still growing, she has now asked that we add in, several other communities asked these questions. We did not in 2017, about the quality of planning and development, about that entire function. So again, these aren't questions that are new, they're new to us, but they are questions that many other communities ask in this particular survey.
And I like those a lot. This was one of the sections that I had a disconnect, whereas some of those questions I would answer with agree, and some of those questions I would answer with satisfied. And so there was a bit of a disconnect. So it may just be a rewording of the questions.
Yeah, I see it. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like on the first one,
Right.
in general, my neighborhood needs to be improved. To me, that's an agree to disagree, scale. But on the affordability of housing, that's to me, a satisfied to
So
dissatisfied.
and actually, I see that we don't even have headings on this one. So strongly
I
agree,
kind of assumed
agree.
they were, but yeah.
Typically you'd have strongly agree, neutral.
Yeah, so whatever
disagree,
works,
and
you guys
strongly
can work it.
disagree. So
Yeah.
I think we should be able to do that.
Yeah, I like the intent of the questions. It just was out of sync for me.
I understand.
So the next change is to question 16. Kelly had asked, since over the last couple of years, she has made a large attempt to beef up her social media channels. So she has asked that we add Parks and Recreation Facebook page into those questions of how you currently get news about North Kansas City.
If we do that, should we also do, we do city. Are there any other Facebook pages, or is that it?
Since the police department would be categorized as city,
Okay, okay.
Does the library have a Facebook page? Rick says they do. Maybe we want to put that on there too for the library, or no?
I don't know. Do they have a Facebook page?
Rick says they do.
I thought I seen something on my Facebook from them. In fact, I know I did today.
Yeah, they got one.
Why don't we put them on there too? Be for library and parks.
So right now, in the survey, we haven't really asked too much about library services. I mean, we can throw that one in about the library Facebook page, but we're not really asking, I don't know if the library does any kind of surveying of its customers.
Did they have any input before the survey was, did we talk to the library at all, or no? About the
I don't believe we did, because we were following on the format of the previous one.
Okay. And the only reason I bring it up is they're a city service. I mean, they provide a service here in the city.
Yeah, well,
Again, this
we-
is just my opinion. I
Sure.
think we ought to have a few questions about the library. I don't know what other people think.
Hopefully, a lot of these questions are relatively general questions, like behavior of employees, for example, number 20. So, we're hoping that those would, library employees would be considered at the same time as these others are. Yeah, as you know, library largely functions independently of the rest of the city.
And so does the parks a lot. Well,
Yeah,
we help them a
That's-
lot more.
That's
with
true,
parks.
it does.
Yeah.
Question 19 was asked to be added. Have you attended a public meeting or open house in the last 2 years? That's just so we get a better understanding of how many people are attending those.
Do you care what they attended? Like, do you, okay.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Shouldn't have asked, do you
Like-
care?
Okay.
Very good question.
Kind of a follow-up to that, I'd be curious what people's reasons for not attending might be. Could we list a reason? Maybe it's the hours of it, the day of the week, just not interested? I mean, what is preventing them from showing up?
You can direct your staff as you want. I was just going to make the comment that nationally, according to a national study, only 4% of respondents nationally said that they attend annually a public meeting of any kind.
I guess
Whether
maybe
it's a
even-
council meeting
yeah.
or an open house or some type of a public meeting, only 4% of people say they do. So
I guess
it's just a trend.
For our purposes, just knowing what the percentages would probably be some good data, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I was just curious if people even knew we had, because you get some people that say we put it out there a lot, but then you get a certain percentage of people that say I didn't know this was happening. I don't know, just putting that.
I wonder if we should split that and ask two questions without getting too much into it. One of them, or were you aware of, and two, have you attended? I wonder if that's an easy change we could make without, get a little more data, but without getting too much into the details.
you could probably, You think, Robert, we should be able to ask a question? Are you aware of that the city holds occasional public meetings and open houses? Yes, no, and then if so, have you attended?
Yeah.
You can ask whatever questions you want, but I would tell you at some point, you're going to get into an issue of making it so long that people won't want to fill out the survey. And so generally, we don't like to go further than 6. I think on your business survey, you're at 7 because of the need to have some of the Armor Road questions. Really don't want to push it too much, but, you know, there might be
Yeah.
other questions that you think are less important if they're things you really, do want to have your staff delve into. It becomes a matter of just kind of managing that and deciding
priority.
what your priorities
Yeah,
are.
and this has been kind of a big topic over the last couple of years, so that's why I think I'm curious about it.
Speaking of, survey length, one of the questions that we did remove from 2017 was the previous question 18, which was in reference to the Citizens Academy. And that is something that staff is currently working on to bring forward to the city council.
Do we need a question on survey length? Was this survey too
Was this,
long?
was the
Yeah.
survey too long?
Yeah,
I
that should
guess?
be the last question.
How satisfied are you with the length of this survey?
I don't know if we want the end. No. Some of the things going back to the previous question of kind of what is a special event. Question 21, we added some of those special events, the arts in the park and the movies in the park, since those were new between the last time we asked this survey and the current time that we're asking the survey. The next page, page 6, what modes of transportation do you or your family use on a regular basis?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And then question 26 is, do you own or rent your home? Kind of going back to some of the data that we would like to be able to have.
Was
I
that
mean,
not in the last survey?
No, it wasn't.
Wow.
So that is the conclusion of this particular survey until we get to the Armor Road questions, which, like I said, we'll pick that up at the tail end of this work session. Do you guys have any more questions about the community survey before we pivot over to the business survey? There will be an area at the bottom of both surveys. It's not showing up on this one, but it is showing up on your longer form version of should somebody want somebody to follow up with them to put their personal information. Because this is a random sampling and an anonymous survey, we're really trying to make sure, and especially when you get into a municipality that is smaller, it can be very easy to identify somebody through survey information, which is why we try to really make sure that we're doing this anonymously and using a sampling. But there is going to be a field at the bottom of both surveys that if somebody wanted a representative, a city person to follow up with them, that they can leave their name and contact information.
But they are de-identified. In the rest of the survey, that's the only place really they would identify themselves.
Otherwise, it's anonymous,
Uh-huh,
the
okay.
responses are.
I was just curious on the age. Why do you, I guess you're getting all the people in your household. So in question 28, you're getting all the people in your household and their ages, but then you want to know their age. So you are using that to calculate, like, who's responding to the survey? Is that why we asked that question? 29, 28, 29?
Yes, to try to get an understanding of,
Who's actually responding?
and to be able to infer whether or not there are, if answers to park questions, for example, might be different for those who have children
Okay.
than maybe households that do not have children. People that like to play with numbers and delve into those things like to have as much of that information as possible.
Okay, thank you.
We got the census coming in this year, too. And are we gonna be bombarding them with all kinds of?
We won't get those findings till next year, though.
Is that right?
So they will conduct the survey, they will conduct the census in April, but we won't start getting that information till next
I
year.
guess that was the mayor's point, though. There.
You're getting at the same time, the timeliness of it. Mhm.
Yeah, so what we're hoping for, and they will be similarly mailed, you're right, is that after this work session, we would work with ETC to develop those, share that business information, understand exactly what we're looking for. Then ETC would distribute the survey at the end of February, March.
So we're going to get it in ahead of the census.
With the goal of reporting out its findings at your second city council meeting in April. So it would be after the election, and then that next, not during that particular meeting, but the second one in April, the report would be presented. We're trying to kind of put these up into a stair step so that the city council would have that information as they go into their goal-setting session.
Understand your point about the census, sir. Of course, they only do that every 10 years, and it just so happened, we're catching them the same year.
Well, I like that they get all the information from both sources. I think that would be really interesting. I wouldn't want, to the mayor's point, I wouldn't want people to think, well, I already did this, so I'm not going to answer the census questions. That would be my only concern. So I don't know if we need to tell people, like, this is not a census.
I think we could do that in the cover letter.
Okay.
So ours will also look and feel dynamically different. The census is going to be just a little postcard. So they will look and feel tangibly different.
Is there any reason that 31 and 32 aren't combined? I mean, why are you separating Hispanic and Latino?
So that actually gets into a race versus ethnicity question.
Yeah.
That pairs.
32's got all the rest of the people.
So that pairs exactly, that is so we can help match the information that the census collects. That is the format that the census asks race versus ethnicity questions.
Why aren't they 31 just part of 32? That's asking the same question.
It is how federal grants tabulate information. They tabulate it in these categories. If we were to capture the information differently, we're not going to be able to apply for federal grants because we don't have the information classified the way that they categorize the information that they would like. It is a race versus ethnicity question.
So they separate them too.
Yes.
I mean, I don't care if it is. I just didn't know why it is. Okay.
So if we do our best to try, well, we'll come back at the end. I was just going to get approval for this survey, but we'll do it after the Armor Road questions. Yeah.
So I'll pivot over, if that's okay, to the business survey. Since this entire survey is new, I didn't think I would go line by line, but more touch on categories and why we are looking for this specific information. So part one is really feedback about city services. How would they rate our police services or EMS? If they interact with city staff, how are they treated? They are very similar questions that you would see in the community survey, but it's more asked toward the business community. If they have interfaced with us, which department are they interfacing with? So those are some of the questions in that category one. And again, one of the other communities, Shawnee, has conducted this survey. They did it last year. And as Robert kind of mentioned, they're trying to benchmark it. So there is a little bit of, not urgencies, but importance of asking the same style of questions to be able to benchmark ourselves against our peers.
Kansas City's adopted this format. Sorry, Kansas City has adopted this format as well for the most part.
Part two is perceptions of the community. How do they feel? Are they proud to be from North Kansas City? How is our access to highways? Some of these things we can change, some of these we can't. It would be very helpful to know why these businesses are located here, and some of these questions help us understand that. As well as prioritization questions, what are the 4 items we should be focusing on? What's the business atmosphere like? Do you feel like North Kansas City is you've been here for a long time, are you seeing it moving positively or are you seeing it moving negatively? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Number 3 is workforce issues. As you know, this is a large topic of conversation, not only in the metro, but nationally, is workforce issues with large and small employers. It would be very helpful to get an understanding of where are we at on that spectrum here in North Kansas City. What's the quality? Are their workforce have transportation issues? What is our requirement for property maintenance versus perhaps another community that they used to be located in? Again, benchmarking, seeing where we're at on that spectrum. Number 5 is fantastic information that we will have once the survey is complete, and that's your future plans. Robert had touched on one community's wake-up call of 11% of their businesses are looking to leave within the calendar year. We don't have the capacity to understand where our business community is right now with some of their expansion, or are they looking to shrink their workforce? This will give us a really good insight into our business community on, we're looking to expand, but we're not sure we're going to be able to do that in North Kansas City. I'm looking to expand, but I'm having problems. I'd like somebody to reach out to me. What are some of the barriers that perhaps we at city level don't understand about their business needs, and maybe they just need to be connected to resources that are already here within the community? As well as demographics. We do have some demographic information with our businesses, but as I mentioned, we don't regulate every business, so we don't have an understanding of all the businesses that perhaps don't go through the business license information. As well as what's their primary market. So that's some of the information that this business survey, that we as staff are kind of very excited to have, this granular level of understanding of, are they, not only are they satisfied, but what are their future plans within North Kansas City? Do you guys have any questions about this? We do ask questions about what business organizations do they belong to, and how do they find their information about business-related news within our community?
You know, back there on number 8, I don't see anything about affordability, you know.
I'm sorry, Mayor, can you respond? Can you say that again?
Affordability for a business to be coming into Northtown.
This was on number 8, did you say?
I think that's where it falls, but I could be wrong.
Looking about affordability.
Images.
That would seem like it.
I,
Well, I think we can find, either add it if it's not in here, or, yeah, to ask a question about, how satisfied are you with the affordability
well,
of
what I'm
doing
getting at
business in
is
North Kansas
we
City?
do have areas where people can come in and for pretty low cost, start up a business and get rolling, and then if it goes, they can expand, you know. I mean, like the Iron District down there, and iWorks, and
We might have other areas that are becoming too expensive and they can't support their business.
We'll work with ETC on where it seems to natively make sense to ask that question.
The only feedback I had on the business one was on question 26, I was curious because we don't give them a lot of options to describe their position with the business. I just thought that was interesting. I wasn't sure why that was. So we specifically call out CFO. We say owner, CFO, or manager. But there's a lot of other options, so I was just curious as to why that question was worded that way.
Those are typically the 3 most common that we hear from when people fill
Okay.
them out. So that's just what we hear. There are others, which is why we give that other category, and if over time we see enough people responding that are filling it out that have a different title,
Then you add those?
yeah, we would do that. But typically, those are the top 3 that we get back from people who fill it out.
I don't think I saw this on here, but could it make a difference to know whether or not a business only has facilities in North Kansas City, or possibly has facilities here and in other locations? Differentiate the two. So it's like someone that has a better understanding of like what other cities look like as well. When they fill this out, you're saying, okay,
Ask
I know
them
what
if
this
they
looks
have a-
like compared to my experience in Shawnee.
Ask people
or-
if they have a presence in other cities as well as North Kansas City. Is
Something to that effect. I'm not entirely sure how that would
The question
look,
is, what do you do with that response? If you
Yeah.
get that, is it
That's true.
useful to you? And I think it comes back to kind of making those choices with limited space. And we can certainly look at it if the council thinks that's important, but
Yeah.
I would say that's one where you can ask a lot of things about the company, how they started, information that's interesting, but is it something that you're going to be able to do something with?
Okay, yeah, no, I see that.
Yeah, I really don't see how that would make a difference in regard to our city itself, with all due respect.
The question is, probably more value, are you planning on relocating or are you planning on expanding here?
That would be a
so that
good
we
question.
can plan for the future.
Is that in there? I didn't see it.
Yes, question 17.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Any other feedback before we talk about the Armor Road questions in each survey?
The last page on your handout, we combined the Armor Road onto one page just for ease of review. The top part is the community survey. It's the Armor Road Complete Street questions that we'd ask on that particular survey. And then below the blue line is the same questions, but they're asked a little bit differently, and they're more targeted for our business community. So the community survey is, how do you feel about the Armor Road Complete Street project? Positive, negative, neutral, unsure. And what do you think the next steps of the Armor Road Complete Street should be? Continue to make planned improvements based on the adopted plan. Keep the current configuration, but table additional improvements for further community input. Explore options that restore a vehicle lane, but retains as many pedestrian and bicycle elements as possible. And restore the previous configuration, removing the on-street parking, bike lanes, pedestrian refuge islands, and decorative elements.
I'm okay with it. The only thing I would say is that I think we should define complete street. Complete street is this. Because we know what that is. We've worked with it for a long time.
We tried to
but-
do that right above.
Yeah,
Do you think?
whereas you say the
When it says
project
in the
added
summer,
crosswalks.
in the
for-
summer of 2019,
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
made
no, I mean
improvement.
the concept of a complete street,
Oh.
because a complete street is kind of it's a concept that, people in city planning know, we know now, but I think most residents wouldn't
So
necessarily
if
understand
we
it.
included this description, but then added, we call this project the Armor Road Complete Street Project.
Yeah,
Would that
that's
take
fine.
care of it? Okay.
Yeah, I just think,
Just
I
clarifying that
just
that's what we're
Googled-
talking about.
because I Googled like complete street definition, and there's a lot of, like, the U.S. Department of Transportation has a definition, Smart Growth America has a definition. I mean, there are definitions of a complete street project, and I think people need to understand what that is before they can truly answer the question.
We can absolutely reword that.
And the other thing is fix the spelling of neutral.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
caught that
I
this
figured you
afternoon.
probably did, but.
It's one of those
And
things
I
you
think
look at 100 times and you
Right,
don't see it.
exactly, yeah.
and I think, Eric, if you added that to what you already said here, that you already described what that is. If you just
That's what I was thinking.
just, make it a little bit clearer. I mean, I think you described it really well, but probably not in a way that people
We'll make
who-
sure that people understand, this is what
Yeah.
we mean when we talk about
Like,
the Armor
very
Road
simply.
Complete
Yeah.
Street.
very
Project.
simply,
Because-
and not because it has to be simple, but because that's,
Right.
I
Oh,
mean,
we
in
wanna be
general, like, here's a definition, and in general, this is what complete streets mean to me. Maintain to enable safe, convenient, comfortable travel and access for users of all ages and abilities, regardless of their mode of transportation. I don't think people necessarily understand that's what we're trying to go for with a complete street. And I think that's really what we're trying to go for with a complete
I
street.
think we were trying to assess how they felt about the project that we did.
And I think if we make it too complicated, I really think we need to keep it and just, and I
Yeah,
appreciate
well-
what the definition is if you Google it, but let's make it so everybody can understand what we mean by that. I think they'd be more prone to not be objective to it if they understood exactly what the goals were.
Well, the question is, are you trying to get a subjective, a visceral response to what we're doing? Or are you trying to get an objective understanding of what, and I think if people are doing it or answering these questions in a tunnel, and say, oh, I don't like that, I don't like this, right? They're not stepping back and thinking about, oh, okay, well, oh, that's what you're trying to do with this complete street project. So that's really, I guess, what I'm saying, that it all depends on what you're wanting to answer. Do you want a visceral response about how they feel about driving down Armor Road? That's what you'll get.
I guess that's what we thought the council had wanted. I mean, maybe we could remove the just the reference to the Armor Road Complete Street project and just sort of say, how do you feel about, the
happened?
project that occurred, something like that.
But I think you're missing an opportunity to explain to people what it is, what the concept is,
What I
what a
hear you
complete
saying,
street is.
Councilmember, is explain the value of the project,
Yeah,
not just.
these
the-
guys all voted for it
What
because
you-
they understood the value of the complete street project. They understood the value of what it was trying to accomplish, and I think that's an
Perhaps
opportunity
If you
to.
had language that said, with the goal of enhancing safety, da-da-da.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I
city
think you get a
did
more
this,
well-rounded response, I
and
guess.
which they call the complete street project, the way
Correct.
Eric said.
How does council feel about that?
I had a comment on, I mean, I think this, if you want to tweak it, that's fine, to explain why we did it, it's fine. But I think it says right here where it says we added crosswalk, pedestrian refuge islands. I mean, I think that really explains what we did, and, I mean, you can infer why we did it, or we can add why to make, traffic and pedestrian and all modes of transportation safer. You can add that, but, I mean, a lot of the explanation is right here in the body of it before we ask the question. That's how I feel.
I would say we should leave it like it is. However, I think that the council is going to have to say, okay, whatever the community wants. I mean, there's some of us, we'd take it out tomorrow, and some of us would, but I think
Well,
we're
we
going to
would
have.
leave it to the council as to what you do with the report once you receive it.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to, the council's going to have to agree to, if this is what they want, then we're going to leave it alone. I mean, anything,
I think would be the whole idea of the survey, is that it's representative of what the city wants.
What the citizens want.
So given that this is a highly political matter, I do want to make sure that we're wording this in the way that the majority of the council would like.
are you?
I heard Valerie, saying, I'm not sure I'm hearing that from others.
I mean, generally, I would agree with what Valerie's saying, though.
Are you
would
open
like
right?
us to do a definition of the Armor Road, of what a complete street
I
project is.
think from my
and then
perspective,
ask
the only
question.
thing that's missing is access for users of all ages and abilities regardless of their mode of transportation, something along those lines. That's what I view as missing.
Okay.
Because that's the idea of a complete street. That's the complete part of it, from my perspective. Yes, all those other things are great, and I agree that's partial definition of it, but when you're really talking about a complete street, it means complete for all modes of
So
transportation.
just add that in and leave.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. That's the only
All
piece
right,
that's missing for me.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Are you open to outside influence? Rich Groves, did you want to say something?
Come up to the mic.
Is it on?
Yep.
Oh, well, I thank Kim for giving me a chance to have some input to this before you're seeing it. You had a question number 19 on the resident survey, which I think something like that ought to be also in the
The
business.
public meeting or open house.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Were they aware that there were open houses, and did they attend them? And if not, why not? And I think we've gone on record as to why not, and you've taken some remedial action on that, and I appreciate that.
Are you thinking that fits in the Armor Road part, or are you thinking that fits in the
Just
whole
in
business
general
section?
about
In the
open
business
houses
survey?
and
Okay.
community
Yeah,
input.
I agree.
Because they should feel like they have the same right to attend those and participate in them. And the other is, I'm just a little confused about, I thought you said initially that you were going to send it out to all businesses and all residents, and then there's some discussion about random, so I'm just not sure, to your point, Mayor, about, they're all different kinds of businesses, and the businesses in the PID are totally different than the ones in the downtown district. And are we going to get a good representation, and do we know if we did?
Can I answer that?
Bang for our buck.
So a lot of that information would be tabulated by ETC. So we would share our entire business license, all of the information that we have. They would also pull from other different forms of information to make sure that the respondents, because they will have the information on the respondents that say it's 20% heavy manufacturing, that the response that they're getting mirrors that 20% of heavy industrial users. So that would be one of the things that we're going to be working with ETC is to make sure that our business community is represented by the percentage of which resides here. I mean, there is a lot of mathematical that goes into that, but if we are representing 20% service industry, we want to make sure that that our response rates match. And that's why when Robert talks about response rates, it's very important to make sure that those response rates are matching the pools of the information that they have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you got everything you need?
Did you want to go over the Armor Road business questions? Understanding that the top part is going to mirror what we say in the bottom part. So the same definition and kind of information at the very beginning, we would update that in the business one. That way they are together.
Yeah.
We do ask a couple of different questions. We ask if your business is located on or immediately adjacent to Armor Road. We ask if the business has been affected by the Armor Road Complete Street project. And if it has, is it positive or negative? And then we have a feel that they can kind of dialogue with us on that. And then question number 32 is a complete mirror of question 36 on the community survey.
Yeah, I think that's great because even if you're not on Armor Road, your business may be affected by Armor Road. Yeah.
So do those look okay?
Are we good?
With the revisions.
Well, with that then, if we do our best to incorporate, our goal, as I said, was to try to get this finalized so that ETC could actually administer the survey, get it done by the end of March, I think was right, and then, get it, a report to you in April. So if we can, do we have your okay to go ahead and try to make these changes and move forward with it?
Are we going to look at the number of businesses we're going to send it to as well?
I guess
think
I
they-
need a motion of some sort from council, and if you increase it, we
You know,
probably need to
I
get a
don't know if y'all
revised
think
quote.
it's worth, doing that. I don't know. And if we do, what would the number be?
Let the experts, let them do it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, do you feel like that's a pretty solid number, though, for targeting businesses?
We will, under contract, we will obtain at least 100 responses from the businesses, which we believe, that's a leap of faith, we believe it's about 10% of your
Okay.
population. So that is adequate to drive the number that we're trying to get to. And then that should be sufficient. I think the question that I heard Councilmember Clevenger say is, what if we wanted to send it out to every single business that we can find
That would
listed in town?
drastically increase the cost.
If we wanted to do that, you will drive the cost up, I can tell you that. I'm willing to get the numbers and do that if that's the pleasure of the council, but we're here to provide you whatever service you want, but
And I'm not trying to be a fly in the ointment. I just want to make sure we get everybody the chance that wants to participate, so. But whatever, if you guys are the experts and so.
Generally, you don't have every single business participate in these kind of surveys. You do a sample amount. And is 100 appropriate? I'm sorry, I wasn't here earlier.
typically, yes, my name is Robert Haycock, I'm with ETC
Thank you,
Institute, and we've been trying to target 10% in terms of the response rate. We will have to send out more than that in order
Right.
to get that response, but
So you're
that's,
going to send them out to a whole lot more people than that. and
there will
hope
be
for
more than
10%
100 that will
response.
receive it because we won't get 100% complete.
Yeah, I think that's great. I
That's
think that's fine. I think that answers your question, Zach, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Are the businesses going to be allowed to go online and fill out this survey also?
Good.
Yes.
Then why can't you get with Rich, and Rich can tell all the businesses that he can get a hold of, that if they want to, they can go online?
They can, now they would not be
User
counted
results.
in the number, Mr. Hickok was saying earlier, but
Well, they're giving
we could let them know so that if they want the opportunity to provide that input, we would get that. It just wouldn't become part of the survey
Yeah.
results.
I would say the most important thing, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, is to promote the fact that it will be sent out to businesses, and if you receive one, please fill it out. If we're encouraging a certain subgroup of people or users of city services to fill it out, we can't count them because it would take away from the randomized nature of the methodology here. So I understand full-heartedly, get the word out, and we always work with cities to, help find ways to let the business community know that this survey is coming. And as I said before, most of the business surveys, they won't fill it out online. They won't fill it out on hard copy. They'll answer you. They'll give you 15 minutes on the phone. But business owners, for whatever reason, we have not found as much success getting them to go online to fill out something online. I can't say exactly why that is, but that's shaping up just to be the way things have gone for us as we start doing these all over the country.
And you'll be following up with the businesses if we don't get responses and calling them and getting the information.
Yes, sir. We will do whatever it takes to get you the 100
100
responses.
Okay.
Great.
Move to adjourn.
Aye.
You're gonna need a second.
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 Okay. Let's take about a 10-minute break before we start off again.